Whether you want to be toned, have better metabolic health, look better naked, or increase strength, building muscle is likely going to be a big part of your journey. Let's assume you have all of your ducks in a row in terms of nutrition, sleep, recovery, and program design. If you aren't focusing on these two things, you're leaving gains on the table. I'm Annie Miller, Certified Strength and Conditioning Specialist, and I help you learn as you train without having to figure it out for yourself. If you're in the market for putting on muscle or even maintaining the muscle that you've built, you need mechanical tension and appropriately challenging working sets. In this video, I'll teach you how to maximize both of these or shift your focus here if you've been unintentionally slacking. This was something that I personally found in my time after baby number 1 and in becoming pregnant with baby number 2. I was being consistent, but was not pushing hard enough, not as hard as I should have been for the program prescription. And I think there's a lot of people, women in particular, who could be getting more from their time in the gym if they were to focus on these two things. First missing piece, or rather missing focus point in your training, is mechanical tension. I've talked about mechanical tension before. Currently, research tells us that there are 3 possible drivers of hypertrophy, aka muscle growth, and these are muscle damage, metabolic stress, and mechanical tension. Mechanical tension is the heaviest hitter here and the most needed. Think about this as the overall demand that we place on the muscle through resistance training. That can be a combination of the weight or the load that we lift, the range of motion, and the stretch and contraction that we put the muscle under, the overall time under tension that we ask the muscle to endure, or the speed at which we ask the muscle to contract at. There are many factors that go into mechanical tension, but for today, I want you to focus on challenging the muscle. That is the point. You need to challenge the muscle if you want it to adapt and grow. So, how do you do that? You're following the program that you're following. So exercise selection is done for you, sets and reps likely will be as well, but your focus on pushing that mechanical tension comes from effort, tempo integrity, and range of motion. Those are the 3 things I want you zooming in on when you complete your programming. We are going to cover effort last because that's the second big differentiator in people who put on muscle successfully and consistently and people who don't. Are you currently following a program, My Built by Annie program, Meg Squats, Marcus Philly, someone else? Drop it in the comments below. I would love to know. Tempo integrity. Ideally, your program includes the tempo at which you should be performing most exercises. If not, find a new program that includes tempo. And be sure you're at least controlling your movements and not rushing through them, especially if muscle growth is your goal. The integrity piece of tempo integrity comes in with how well you're adhering to said tempo. The tempo in the program is there for a reason, and it's your job to accurately stick to it as best you can. This is a performance goal that you could integrate into your weekly training as well, hitting the tempo. Typically, the default would be to go faster than what is prescribed. Maybe the tempo has a pause at the bottom of a squat or a squeeze at the peak of a seated row, but are you really pausing, or are you just bouncing out of the bottom or reaching full range of motion row and then releasing? The tempo I think most of us skimp on is the eccentric phase. Anything longer than 2 seconds and we start counting faster. If it's a 3 or 4 second lower, make it a 3 or 4 second lower. The reason for this is that it matters in the hypertrophy world. Those seconds add up in demand on the muscle from a mechanical tension standpoint and in overall time under tension. You could be skimping out on 10 plus seconds of tension and demand on the muscle per set if you're ignoring and just skimping out on tempo. So that next factor in driving mechanical tension is range of motion. This is one that you can play with. Range of motion is simply another way that we can possibly access more muscle fibers and therefore potential for muscle growth. If you've been going through the motions a bit with your exercises, maybe focus on your range of motion, and if it makes sense, push that a bit. Tempo can also play a role here. If you look at the pull-up, for instance, perhaps you're supposed to have a 3-second lower for your pull-up, assisted or not, and you're lowering for 3 seconds, but that 3 seconds is lowering 3/4 of the way down and then dropping that last quarter like a speed demon. So in that sense, be sure that your tempo is consistent through the whole phase of the movement. Maybe you can find more tension in your hamstrings during the RDL or get a bigger range of motion in your lat pull downs. Something to pay attention to or audit this week: in your training. Range of motion might be a place where you can find and push for more mechanical tension. Remember, everything we've talked about so far falls under mechanical tension and pushing that piece of your training. The second missing piece, which is directly related to pushing that mechanical tension, is appropriately challenging working sets, or better yet, separating warm-up sets from your working sets and leaving room within your program and training to do so. If your program doesn't include load prescription or a set RPE, which is rate of perceived exertion, just know that your working sets should be hard. That applies to main lifts or your accessory work. What is hard? 1 to 2 reps left in the tank with good form. You'll know you're struggling best not by the burn of your muscles, but by the speed at which your reps are being completed. Your last few reps of a working set should be slow. Not actually slow motion to failure, but noticeably slower or stickier than your first few reps. That's a challenging load. Now, this is where the difference between a warm-up and a working set comes into play. Quick lesson here, when I say working sets, I just mean whatever is programmed per exercise. Normally, 3 by 8 to 12 or something like that. Some programs include warm-up sets before that, and some don't. I don't care if your program has warm-up sets in it or not, you're going to count it as a warm-up set and not a working set if it wasn't challenging enough. This is where gains so commonly get left on the table. So let's say you're doing something that has 3 sets for your working sets. Your first set really should have counted as a warm-up, but you adjusted, upped the weight, did your next 2 sets at an appropriate load, so really you only completed 2 working sets. Does that make sense? As much as you can, be sure your prescribed working sets are all at challenging loads unless specified by your program. That is it. Those are the 2 areas within your training that I think you can find more gains. Mechanical tension, largely through tempo integrity, range of motion, and effort, or being sure that your working sets shouldn't really have been warm-up sets. I hope you have a nugget to focus on this week in your training and that you can feel the difference when you apply these ideas to your workouts. If you found this helpful, be sure to subscribe, and I will catch you in the next one.